If you use it, you're a believer. I constantly get people into the line by using this bottle first and foremost. And why? Easy to put in, more oil, more color, more individualization of your strains. Who can say no to that, right? And it's going to size up your trichome glands to the point where you do see more light through them. So the really showy stuff. Okay, so here's a little secret, guys. All right, now we're going to get there.
All right.
Or now let's talk about real icy weed. The fact of the matter is, the stuff that's the iciest, it doesn't even necessarily have the most oil. It has the biggest heads. The biggest heads are going to catch light and they're going to glint like a diamond. So when you have something like... Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we talk about all things cannabis and lifestyle related. And I am back here in the Jug Den with my very good friend and the man behind the glass, Josh GRAMBO. Today, Gabe will not be in the chair, so I won't have my normal co-host, but we've been having some good fun, myself and Josh doing these shows. And one thing I always like to mention very specifically is shout out to all commercial growers, anybody working in a commercial grow. If you are interested in samples, of course, we do have the sample request form online, but that's really more for the home grower. For any of you commercial guys, please do not hesitate to reach out. We would love to put some commercial products into your hands. Anyhow, Josh, we've got a fun one today. People are always asking us, how do you get, and I know this is always when I was on Dude Grows, shout out to Dude Grows as always. They, it was always, how does Jerin get the frosty weed? How does he do that? How does he get that look? How does he get that shine? And, I do think that a lot of times people, as is very common, they start at the end rather than starting at the beginning, right? They just want to get to the end. They just want to get to the end point. They want the frostiest. They want the best, but they're not understanding of what process that really takes.
Yes, because quality's king now. Everyone used to be about the big beaster nugs, man.
Sure,
and now we're trichome farmers. We're oil farmers.
We're oil farmers as it is, right?
Yes.
And the whole thing is I talk a lot about this and about even the fact that oil itself, does actually weigh more than plant matter. And what are we growing? Well, being oil farmers, that's the point of the plant and the part of the plant that's of horticultural significance. We're not growing corn, so why would plant matter to us, right? So I want to have less plant matter and more oil stacked on top of it these days. Whereas, like you said before, back in the day, the bigger the buds, the more impressive it was. But we have evolved from that point. And so let's get into that a bit. How do we, again, one of the funny things is nobody really says, oh, look how well that plant must have performed. Oh, look how efficient the nutrients must be taken. Oh, look how the environment must have been perfect. All they do is say,
yeah.
Wow, amazing looking herbs,
This
right?
guy must have had some biology in his soil.
Mm-hmm. Nobody thinks about that. They just see the end product, right? And that does frustrate me a little bit when there is, a lot of this stuff that's out there. It is very it's easy to photograph, right? And it comes out well, it comes out shiny, but that doesn't tell the whole story. For someone like us, and I believe most of our listeners, if not all our listeners out there, you want that look to translate to the smoke as well. And I think you do lack that a lot of times.
The frost is almost like the home grower's THC percentage.
Right.
It's like it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but when you look at it, you go, oh, Jesus Christ.
Right. Well, and again, I do think that people a lot of times, it's kind of like when somebody came into the grocery store back in the day and said, hey, how much is your CO2 system? And I go, well, where are you at along as far as, building your room? They're like, oh, I'm just getting it built.
Right.
Oh, wow. You were 3 steps ahead of where you should be. You need to start all the way back here. So I think a lot of times people obviously look for any kind of cheat. What bottle can I have? Is there a specific nutrient line? What's the cheat code? Because I think so many people just look for that these days. There's a hack for everything, right, Josh? There's got to be a hack.
And that'll be interesting. We'll be discussing that a little bit later. The does CO2 even affect trichome growth? Some people think it's just plant growth. Some people think it's trichomes. Is it secondary metabolites?
I've got my own opinions.
We're going to talk about it.
So, again, it's not one of those things. To me, there isn't any little trick. It's a culmination of things. It's not just, I remember the old one, throw ice on your roots, right?
Oh, yeah,
that was a fun one,
get some
right?
Purple.
Or, dive your temperature towards the end of flower, or even like our good friend Rasta Jeff, talks about some light manipulation at the end. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do, but I also believe that really just providing the right environment And yes, maybe even a bottle or two in the right times will actually help get these kind of responses, like senescence responses, et cetera, really up and moving and getting that, the plants to really finish the way we'd like.
So maybe we should define our terms even. So we do get a lot of newer growers watching these days.
Sure.
What is a trichome? Why should I care? What is a stalk? What is a gland head?
Well, that's a really good question. And even to begin, I'll even back that up a little bit more. If you go in like a Webster's dictionary, type of definition, it's just a plant hair, right? So it's a very general term. So I think a lot of people think it's specific to cannabis.
Specifically the globe on the stalk.
Sorry, everybody. It's not. It's really, and there's there's ones that are just more hair-like. And I'm not a trichome aficionado as far as that goes. But yes, there are a number of different styles. Of course, you do have a different anatomy to the trichome instead, as Mr. GRAMBO alluded to over there, as far as the stalk, the head. What are we even looking for? In truth, if you're getting it down to nothing, we're looking for the head. We want that nice little fat ball on top to separate from the stalk of the trichome.
Talking with some of the elite hash makers up in Canada, like they'll even talk about like, oh yeah, your glands are all full of stalks and everything. You think of the trichome as like the whole thing, but it really is heads, just the head.
Yeah. Right?
So
and really, if we're talking about it, trichome is going to be a resin gland, right? That's how we're going to really define it. And really, if you can even see at a microscopic level, those heads really will ooze out actual oil out of the trichome heads themselves. But again, it's not a specific term, and you could probably even find what is it? I know there's 2 or 3, I would say, main trichome types. There's a nice picture of trichomes that you can see right there, and that's always lovely. And you can see they're getting to like a little bit cloudy in there. You can see almost that little bit of ambering that's coming in there. Wow, that is a gorgeous picture. That really is.
One of the more fascinating things is the effect can be controlled less about indica and sativa. We always talk about here on Jug Dealers, we're not a fan of the indica and sativa. It's the wide leaf versus narrow leaf.
Yes. And it, is it an industrial variety or is it a drug variety?
And so just looking at this plant right here, I know if we pulled it right here and right now, we are going to get a more kind of sativa-y feeling. In theory. Or maybe not, right?
I mean, well, here's the thing. Everybody's going to say everybody's trichome is a little bit different, but in reality, everybody's chemistry is a little bit different. So the reality is it's really hard to define things so I would just say basic like that, right? And I just feel like it's always much more complex. It's like when people want to say, well, nitrogen makes plants grow. Well, yeah, but it does that, but a whole lot of other things. And it also does things in conjunction with other things. And it's just, you can't simplify. With plants, you can, and really with biology in general, you can't simplify that, can't simplify things that easily. Let's go back to what trichomes are a little bit too, right?
Can we say they are a sunscreen for the plants?
I would say they're sunscreen. I would say they're protection from desiccation.
Oil sweater.
Yep. That's the thing. I always say, the oil sweater, right? And that's one of the things that winter frost does is trick it that it's going to actually frost. So it pushes out more oil to protect itself and actually will make the trichome heads themselves double or even triple in size. And that does help keep that heat within the plant, but also desiccation. Like you said, like a sunscreen to help from the leaves being damaged, right? But also it's a bit of a pollen catcher, right? Because that's really what we're dealing with. That's
exactly what it is.
Right? We're dealing with a frustrated female at the end of the day that is wanting to get watch out. That is wanting to get pollinated, and she is doing everything she can to make that happen, even up to the point at the very end, possibly even throwing out some other flowers. I'm trying to avoid some of these terms that are getting so it'll
selfing themselves.
Yeah. So there's
self yourself.
But again, that's even a plant, even a true annual plant is going to try and cross themselves. It's going to throw this stuff out, but it's also an attractor for pollinators, right? So those terpenes and flavonoids and things like that, think about that out in nature. It's definitely going to attract pollinators. So a trichome is a very general thing. The reason we see it as much as we do on our plant, although you can absolutely see it elsewhere in the plant world. But the big deal with our plant is we have hand selected it for this because early on, whether it was, rubbing charas or doing anything like that, or any type of separation technique, whether it was dry or wet or whatever, there was an understanding that there was let's just say something to the oil, right? And obviously it's been used, for with textiles and all kinds of other things and paper and things as well. But there was an understanding early on that the oil and the resin it was kind of one thing, and then the industrial parts and uses were kind of another.
And we've kind of in the modern, 80s, 90s, the aughts, it's kind of become synonymous of one and the same. We're doing our work to separate them.
Right.
So are we talking, is it fair to say when we're talking trichomes, we're talking stress? We're talking, this is their way of preventing.
I'm glad you bring
dying.
that up. I'm glad you bring that up because in reality, like I look at it as positive stresses. Why is it a positive stress? Because it's oil inducing, right? So whether the plant itself really looks at it as a positive stress, the reason I look at it as a positive stress because I'm maximizing what is of horticultural significance to me.
Right.
Okay. So if
it's
it was
a positive stress to us.
Right. So that, right. And so like, that's why you have different products that simulate a frost response, that simulate even something like an SAR, a systemic acquired resistance response, that will mimic a desiccation response, right? All these things, for us, it is oil inducing, and you're wanting, and the other thing that I would say it's positive stress because you're not really trying to affect the overall growth of the plant. You're not really trying to stress it.
Right.
You're trying to stress at that point to, again, maximize what we're looking for of horticulture.
I like to think of it like working out. You're not trying to strain a muscle. You're trying to break it down just enough so that it regrows more healthy.
And you don't do this to unhealthy plants. You don't do that to unhealthy muscles, right? This is a healthy plant that's done in a very specific time to controlled environment, right? So these are things that are understood that even. Okay, let's even talk about like leaf stripping, right? These are things that came to be standard that seemed to be crazy at first.
Yeah, the schwazzing is taking over the modern era.
I hate that term. It's so dumb. I call
What's
it
it even
pruning.
mean?
I don't know, Josh. I don't know.
We joke. We try to start the rumor that it's Patrick Swayze because he would shave his chest. So it's like it's the schwazzing. It's the schwazing.
So again, so obviously, let me go back to this. If a plant is having problems, there is, these stress responses are definitely not the answer, or even something like, decision, which is a product that we have that's a bloom initiator. I always tell people, do not do that on an unhealthy plant because what you're doing is you're actually starving it of nitrogen for a little bit. You're intentionally blocking out nitrogen to get it to understand that it's moving from, because it's done very quickly, right? You think about nature when it's going from this 18, which never really goes 18 to 12 unless you're like up in the Arctic, by the way.
Okay.
But let's just talk about it. You're going 18 hours of light one day and literally 12 the next day. So that's obviously a stress in and of itself. So this product helps the plant realize what's going on. Okay. And part of that plant's stress response is being in what I would call the transition zone between veg and flower. And that's why it stretches up like that, because it doesn't know what the hell's going on for a little while.
Is that why it's got the skull on the bottle? It's be careful, you sons of bitches.
Well, it's more like, it's kind of like, hey, make the decision. You know what I mean? Are you in veg or are you in flower? And
NewMill, some of the best logos out there. You got to give it up for all the.
And it, came from the old tattoo artist.
Love it.
And you got to love the ambergram too. For anybody that doesn't know that, New Millennium, you could read fretwords backwards or flip it around upside down and read it fretwords or backwards.
I was here for years before I realized that was the case. Cool.
Okay. Moving on. So again, if you have an unhealthy plant, these stress responses are not going to be for those. But if you have healthy roots, you have a stable environment. I mean, all the things we talk about when it comes to the pyramid, if you will, if you've got those things in line, and you've got your minimums maximized, as I like to say, then by all means, put these things to work.
And then that brings us to one of the more controversial modern takes on it. I know that here at the Jug Dealers, we work with the Dutch Lighting Innovations, DLI.
Yes, we do.
And they're one of the only ones selling the lighting additives. And it's like our buddy Kyle over Extract Seller. This guy swears by it. He's got some of the most terpy concentrates I've ever seen in my life. Let's talk about UV.
Let's talk about UV a little bit. Yeah. And again, that was the whole reason. And really the UV, and just to be clear, ours is unique in the sense that it is a gas powered bulb as opposed to being LED driven, right?
Don't trust the LEDs.
So the LEDs are going to be very narrow band. This is going to be broad, much more broad spectrum, right? So it's going to be full spectrum UVA, UVB, and even a little bit of UVC, which is going to be the cleaner, if you will. But that's also where it can be dangerous to work work under. In fact, you're not supposed to work under them, but we really only run them 4 hours a day during what we call solar noon. So you have them sunrise for the first 4 hours. You've got the middle of the day, which you're going to have max UV, and then the last 4 hours of the day in your 12-hour cycle that it's not going to be on as well, which it would be less UV typically out in a natural environment. I think anybody can look at it and go, that makes sense, right?
Yes.
So you've got the PAR region, you've got the photosynthetically active region, right? PAR region, that's what plants are using. But that's not saying that there's other things like, far red or infrared or other things that can't affect the plant or plant metabolism. Even if it's not directly involved in photosynthesis, it's not saying that that's not going to be affect plant morphology.
What do you always say?
Right?
Phenotype is genotype times environment. And we're finding that I think a lot of that HPS flare that we're getting from those old school genetics is that IR. It's those reds. It's heating up the plant tissue, affecting that VPD, the actual VPD from the internal cell tissue.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why I always have the problem with the VPD, because one of the critical pieces of the equation is internal leaf temperature. Yeah. So if you have IR or don't have IR, which again, this is outside, not even outside, I don't know why I'm doing this. These are outside of the PAR region, but they're still within the light spectrum, right?
Yeah. So not just the temperature of the air in your room, and not just the leaf surface temperature, even with like a little IR gun.
Nope, that didn't work. Now it could be within anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees. I mean, it's going to be close, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, folks. So that's not going to do you any good in this particular situation. So UV is a tool. Speaking of these positive stresses, well, obviously UV is out there, and I kind of alluded to when you talked about sunscreen, right? It is a protector, right? So it will put out more UV, and that's really that's the goal here that we're doing it. We're trying to finish out the spectrum and be able to induce responses that wouldn't be done otherwise, right? And these are spectrums that come from the natural environment. Everybody agrees right off the bat that the sun's the best, right, Josh?
Yes.
If you got one, harness the sun and control the rest of it, right? And if that were true, or you could have something that's really truly full spectrum with all this other stuff, and maybe someday we will, that's probably the best way to go. Now, the interesting thing to that though is there's always going to be some strain specificity, because there's always going to also be selection pressure that's added to that. So if a plant was selected under, so there's your PAR right there.
And the EPAR would be the extended outside
PAR,
of the PAR range.
Yes. And I know that, shout out to Bruce Bugby. I know I want to say that's some of the stuff that he is looking at in particular is this extra PAR. Like what, does it do anything? Here's the thing. In my opinion, a lot of these things are always going to be very difficult to very specifically, prove or dial in or whatever, but how can anybody argue with the fact that more spectrum isn't better? I mean, I just kind of look, and you guys kind of know where I don't know everything. I know a little bit about, a few different things, whatever. But when it comes down to the end of it, I always look at nature and go, does that make any sense in nature? Has that ever happened in nature? Like where did this come from?
Right.
And if it doesn't fit in there in any sort of way, and it just totally seems left field, then I typically walk away from that idea. Well, an idea like this, I completely understand what's going on outside. And I also understand what we're trying to grow, which is oil here, right? So that I think is one of the more important considerations when you talk about bringing equipment like this in. Of course, you want to make sure that you have even canopy coverage, even though we are seeming to see a little bit of a systemic quality even to the UV. In other words, if it touches just one side, it'll actually be affected on the other side of the plant that doesn't have direct. Super fascinating.
That's interesting.
And so you really only need a kiss of it, right? And so this is, by the way, this is 150 watts for 100 square feet. You're talking 1.5 extra watts per square feet. Very little power added, very little heat added. You're just adding spectrum. And here's the other thing that I'll leave you with. It's not a grow light, folks. Now pull that up again, Josh. Let's look at it. Does that look like a grow light?
I mean,
It looks like a grow light. But here's the joke, not joke. It doesn't have any PAR, like I was saying.
Right.
So it is a light additive. So much like nutrient additives, where you have your base 17 macros and micros that a plant needs to grow and live out its life, that doesn't mean that all these other additives around it can't make it express itself in a more fully or more towards its genetic potential or whatever. Same thing here. So a plant with just PAR, obviously, as we all know, is going to it's going to grow. We've seen it grow. It's going to grow, and it's going to be able to go all the way through its lifetime. But is it going to produce as much oil as it could? Is it going to produce as many terpenes, flavonoids, esters, thiols, all that fun stuff, and really all the secondary metabolites, which is at this point kind of what we've isolated it down to of what's of significance in general to us, right?
Yeah. So that's people always like, oh, I smoked that Panama Red back in the day. So it was that high was more balanced is the reason that people really appreciated it a little bit more. And I think
balanced or not strong. I mean, but also there was
not strong is a good way of like balanced.
No, because they smoked them like cigarettes. No, it is interesting, but I also think that there's a huge aspect to the sun grown element to that, because there's no doubt that I've, consumed product that did not look pretty, didn't even smell pretty, but was definitely grown in the right type of environment to get enough light during the day and to get the strength of light that it wanted, and the, I would say the complexity of spectrum to really put out some interesting cannabinoids that definitely worked well in my brain.
Well, we're going to talk way more about that. Maybe we can get guys like Kyle in that actually use it, because
that'd be great.
They're not going to spend money. The margins are thin in this world, and I watch some of my closest, very, very good grower friends spend money on things that some people might shake their head at, but the proof's in the
pudding. If it works, it works.
The literal pudding, as it were. If I had a jar here, you'd see it's just terptastic. So, all right, we kind of opened up by talking about the manipulations of things like the ice water and the roots. What is the latent flower? Like once we've kind of built all of our trichomes are kind of stacking. What's the thought as we get into late flower about how to max those out? And
I mean, at the end of the day, patience is obviously a virtue. So doing things like, scoping and everything is important as you get late into flower, but I really like tapering things off, right? So you're not just hammering nutrients all the way to the end. I feel like that can definitely maximize your flower size, but I think it can be to the detriment of quality a bit to keep that feed all the way to the end, right? So now if people want to taper and keep feeding all the way to the end into a very light flush, like even just 2 to 3 days, which is very common these days, I'm okay with that. Here's the thing though. My feeling is always, let's say you're doing an 8-week plant, which I always look at as really more like a 9-week plant. 8 week is 9 weeks. You know what I mean? I don't know, whatever. That's how I've always,
the meme, two more weeks.
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks.
So I always like to, and by the time you've been feeding all this stuff, through veg, into the substrate, and you're dealing with something like cocoa that I've always been a fan of that has a good cation exchange capacity, meaning it's going to have a good nutrient load on the soil colloid and have plenty available. It's not like you stop feeding when you stop feeding and go to flush, which would just be plain water, right? Which that's the one thing, I always have to address. When I say flush, I mean just adding water, but adding water normally, and go back, not an obscene amount.
Go back and watch our flushing episode. Jug Dealers have an entire episode on flushing. I think it sets the terms and parameters correctly.
Yes. So, I mean, I like to obviously have some patience at the end. And again, I always believe that even if you're not feeding out of the bottle you're still feeding from the substrate, which you stacked for the last 8, 10, 12 weeks, however long you've been growing with veg in the beginning of flower. So I never look at it like not feeding. In my personal opinion, the way that we always developed Winter Frost was you would in a 9-week system, right? You'd feed through 7 weeks. You'd use Winter Frost and Ruby standalone, no bases in week 8, and then plain water week 9 to get more oil, more color, more individualization of your strains. That's why we call it the Gateway Jug. You can stack it on top of any current nutrient regimen that you have, and it will work, and it will express your plants in ways you haven't seen it before. It's not going to change your genetics, though. That's one thing I like to always tell people. It's not a magic bullet. It's not God. Okay. If there's red or magentas or burgundies in there or purples, it will bring them out, but it's not going to create them. If it's green weed that's going to fade out yellow, it's just going to help it fade out yellow. But if there has been times in genetics that there were colors that I never had seen in there previously that actually came through with a little bit of patience. Well, what it's doing is it's initiating senescence. Senescence is a natural ripening process, happens in any annual plant.
And I found out that that's actually the correct term for humans as well. As we start to gray out, we are our natural senescence.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. So this is what we're doing. What are you trying to say, Josh?
That you shouldn't drink Winter Frost.
Okay. All right. We're back on track. We're back on track. So, it just helps give that plant the signal, because it is, if you got to think about it, like indoors, it's lacking some of the other natural signals. The soil getting colder naturally, right? Which would be the ice water trick. Hey, shock it in and go. You know what I mean? The ambient temperature becoming cooler, larger diurnal temperature variation between day and night. So like it doesn't get all these other little signals. Now, that's what people have tried to do with additional darkness, ice water stuff, even doing stress responses with splitting stems.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. That was always like splitting stems was always one of those weird things that your hardcore.
Bro, I remember a guy. This is funny. I haven't thought about this story in a very, very long time. I used to work at the largest commercial retail nursery in the state of New Mexico, there in Albuquerque off Osuna Drive. And this is many years ago, but I remember the guy that was working above me, he told a story about how his buddy would go out in the hills with his plants.
Always that guy. It's always that guy.
It's this guy. Yeah. And his buddy would go out there, man. He'd take his horse out there and just stomp the shit out of all the plants. And like, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Now these days I go, I don't know, man. Maybe if the timing was right.
Jerin, we got to talk horse stomping.
So like, that is actually, I haven't thought about that story in a very long time, but
take from that all what you just heard. There's a lesson to be learned somewhere in there. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I took a lesson from
I'm not so sure on the stem splitting. Again, I like positive stresses, but sometimes I think some of these can be a little bit extreme. But again, I totally understand, trying to couple these things together to really get a plant to finish. But again, I will tell people, hey, you don't have to do all that crap. Put in winter frost, and it's going to simulate that. Right. That's the best part about it, right? And you're going to get that effect out of it. That much.
And the different, like your GMO, you bring down early, but it finishes on time.
Correct.
And it brings out more of those onion notes, which
it definitely brings out different notes. And now here's one thing. If anybody ever tells you take something down 2 weeks earlier and it's going to be the same amount of weight and everything else, that's bullshit, right? Especially with a lot of these OGs and whatnot. Even like a GMO, man, you get a lot of swell at the end. Like it's just that last week, like the difference between an 8 week and a 9 week OG can be massive. So my whole thing is no, it's not going to get you the same amount of product. However, in the course of a year, I'll get a whole nother run in and be able to catch up if you're talking totals. So I'm not necessarily afraid of that, right?
So another thing you and I had talked about a while ago, and we got an entire episode about P&K boosters. The answer isn't just to throw P&K on it to increase frost.
No, or size for that matter. I mean, the reality is P&K necessary, and do you want P&K in higher ratios as you get into the meaty part of the curve, of flower? Yeah, absolutely. In my opinion, though, and like we were just talking about, I think one of the secrets is patience. It isn't just throwing P&K at it. Like I said, and anybody that's grown a lot of OGs and things like that or GMO realizes exactly what I'm saying. Patience in that last week and a half, 2 weeks, and not really this necessity to just be blasting them with bottle nutrients. Again, I sell bottle nutrients, folks. It's not that I'm against bottle nutrients.
When the bottle salesman tells you, hey, slow down on the nutrients.
Slow down on that. Because again, I think there's already a ton of residual that's in the substrate, as I also mentioned. And I just think that there's these high, for lack of a better term, these 0, 50, 30, dry PK boosters that were, used pretty heavily through the 90s and 2000s. They definitely size your flower up. But again, are they going to get you more oil? No. So obviously what we want, if you are going to use a PK booster, if you look at the ones that we have out there, you'll see they're not these huge numbers anymore. They're 0.89. You got PK Appetite, which is actually more of a companion product. That's 0.6.9, right? So that's not even
6.9.
Exactly. So what that is actually a soft rock mineral that's a natural P&K chelate. So what it's going to do is it's going to go into the rest of the recipe, whether it's out of your bases or in conjunction with a PK booster, and maximize that P&K uptake. Blastogen's another one that a lot of you guys have been picking up on, and actually some of our biggest supporters and whatnot are getting a thank you package out there. I've been talking to all you guys independently, and you just might see some of this in your package, right? Nice. We also did drop this in Germany for all you folks that are listening over there in the UK, in Germany, and in Europe in general. You will have an opportunity to be getting these products. We will have them full-time available over there, the Blastogen, the Fertilium, and the Rhizium. In fact, I'm going to do a little bit of a little teaser. I'm going to do a Synganic episode. We're actually going to step through all three of those products and really show you how quickly you can go from a pure salt program to a Synganic program like that and up your quality and vigor. And
Blastogen has been a real sensation out there. So, pick it up, use it. It's the good stuff.
But again, as you see, 0.89 rather than 50-30. So there is also a lot of other plant biostimulants in there too. And again, in that synganic type thought process, yes, we want more P and K, but what else is in there that can be, what other building blocks need to be in there to really, get this floral and cluster expansion,
using the money you've already spent in that in that plant medium.
Yes, exactly.
Use it.
Exactly. So, and obviously we've talked a whole lot about winter frost. It always seems to come up. Why? Because it is the gateway drug. But was that a flub there? I mean, the gateway jug, folks. You dirty-minded folks out there. But we do call it that because honestly, it works. And I know we've talked a lot about it. We kind of been beating your head over it. But anybody that's out there, and in fact, anybody that's ever used winter frost, I want you guys to comment in the comment section and tell us just what you think about it. Because again, if you use it, you're a believer. I constantly get people into the line by using this bottle first and foremost. And why? Easy to put in, more oil, more color, more individualization of your strains. Who can say no to that, right? And it's going to size up your trichome glands to the point where you do see more light through them. So the really showy stuff. Okay, so here's a little secret, guys. All right, now we're going to get there.
All right.
Or now let's talk about real icy weed.
Let's talk about it.
The fact of the matter is the stuff that's the iciest, it doesn't even necessarily have the most oil. It has the biggest heads. The biggest heads are going to catch light and they're going to glint like a diamond. So when you have something like winter frost and you pull it up, and in fact, if you guys get big shout out to Josh D, a partner of ours, who's obviously the OG man.
The real OG.
Go the real OG Kush story. Go check him out on Instagram. If you go look at all those videos that he's posting, that's all in our gear. And you can see how it's just glinting in the light and how even with the phone, those heads look so fat. And you can even see the coloring in them with just a phone camera. You can see cloud, you can see clear, you can see amber. That's not the usual, right? So when you have those showy heads, when you have those big fat heads, you can catch the light, make it more glinty, and that is really what gives it that like diamond kind of look to it.
You say an icy made me realize, like, I wonder if that contributed to some of the ice in the rhizosphere. Like, you want ice, you need ice.
I mean. Wow, I just, damn, Josh, I had never considered that before.
Me neither, but
I mean, that's a really good point. But I think also the biggest thing is people need to realize there is no silver bullets. A plant or a root stimulator or something is not going to just fix weak roots if you're continuing to do the problem right. Let's say you're overwatering all the time and you're giving it something like Rhizium to kick it back and get that root follicle hair growth going and everything else. Well, the fact of the matter is if you're not taking care of the problem of overwatering it to begin with, how are you going to go back and save it? So I think a lot of times people they're always looking for a silver bullet. They're always looking for a bit of a hack. And don't get me wrong, I've got some of the best products in the world that'll actually get you the expressions that you're looking for. But you still have to have the pyramid put together. You still need light and environment. You still need to have good genetics. You need to be either an experienced or a grower that's paying attention, right? And only fifth do you actually get to nutrients, right? None of those can supersede the one above it. So fantastic nutrients can't take out or overcome a bad grower. A great grower cannot overcome bad genetics. Great genetics cannot overcome a bad environment. Always keep that in mind. It goes top down, guys.
You always reference this, the
law of the minimum.
Law of the minimum.
So make your minimums your maximums, right? So and obviously in nutrients, you're just trying to give it an even palette and even spread, so you're not lacking any one in particular, because whatever one you're lacking in the case here, they're showing a lack of calcium. Go figure.
And this goes directly to your point about the CO2, when people would come in like, I'm looking for the CO2 system, and that's probably the low plank. That's not the low plank.
That is not your minimum. That's not your minimum. And now eventually, if you get all your environment together and everything, could it become your minimum?
Right.
Yes. And at the moment it becomes your minimum. Now we can play with it.
And before we get to the end, because we're talking about watering and everything, we kind of alluded at CO2 in the beginning. I was talking with the boys over at Build a Soil, and there's no hard evidence on this. What do you think about the idea of CO2 increasing just plant mass versus increasing those?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that there's anything that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, or I can't wrap my head around that makes sense that it would say that increased CO2 is going to give you more oil production, because again, it's more of a stress response.
Right.
Is it going to give you more plant matter? Absolutely. Yes. And that's one of the reasons why you see corn, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now as CO2 has steadily gone up, our ambient is higher today than it was in the 1970s. Yeah. We're at about a little over 420 ppm ambient right now.
So if you took a ppm meter out like your grandfather did, and now it's going to read differently ambiently in nature.
Yes, absolutely. So we're higher now, right? So and that's one of the reasons why you've seen in the green revolution, why that's one of the reasons you've seen, yield yields go up, not only with breeding projects and, modern agriculture and modern agronomy, but also just the fact of the matter is, it is, we have higher CO2 ambient. And when you really talk about agronomy, a lot of those are C4 plants. It'd be like a grass-based plants. Like corn's a grass, actually, right? Maize is a grass. And so a C4 plant's actually going to respond even more so to higher CO2 levels. Now, in most of the scientific reading that I've read, a C3 photoperiodic plant, which is what we're dealing with, tops out at about 800 or so ppm, and then it's going to flatten out. It'll keep getting incremental increases up to maybe 1,000 or so. But again, if you think about it, what plants have seen, yes, it's more now than it was in the 70s, but it's still only a little over 420. It's not 1,000. It's not 1,500. It's none of that.
And then that's directly tied to your PPFD as well. So if you're not bombarding it with enough photons, you're also wasting all that CO2.
And is your metabolism where it should be, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Do you have nutrient uptake where it should be? Is your transpiration where it could be? What's your minimum at this point? Because now you are creating some different variables. So my whole point is getting back to your question. And it was funny because I had somebody one time and I gave them my herb and I showed it to them and they go, do you use CO2 or not? And I was like, no. And they're like, it shows. And I was like, huh. And it was the first time I went, huh. Yeah, but again, as I went back and thought about it, I go, well, really CO2 and really the ones that it really affects are grasses. So you don't have any fluorescence, you don't have any flowers, you don't have any of those type of things on grasses. So I said, you know what? That actually kind of makes sense. I had never thought about that before. So in my mind, I think you get less, you're getting basically more or less, you're getting the same or roughly the same.
It's like if you
oil production, but not more
if
plant
you
matter.
dotted a balloon everywhere and then blew it up.
There you go.
So actually,
hey, I like that one,
It
Josh.
might be making your weed less frosty.
Well, it is. I say it's going to give you more weight, but it's going to move. It's going to move the same amount of oil on more surface area rather than less surface area. I want more oil on less surface area. Yes. And I think that's where modern cannabis is moved toward, especially because we're talking extract, right? So why do people want all this extra oil? Now, again, we can also talk about flower morphology and things like that for washability and things like that. But at the end of the day, you want a lot of oil if you're a hash.
I know why they want that, because they want to be oil farmers.
Who doesn't want to be an oil farmer?
I do love that shirt. I get a lot of compliments.
It's still our top selling shirt. It really is still our top selling shirt. I wish everything wasn't so damn expensive these days, and we damn near give those things away.
Well, we did. We lowered it a little bit. So
okay, all right. Well,
go check out the new.
If you, and it's probably not by much. I'm thinking like in the $5 range. But hey, we're trying to keep it where where it all makes sense. But we love you guys wearing the gear. So thank you all for the support. And you're buying the shirt.
CO2, yes. No hard data. We don't have the white papers on it.
Don't have any hard data on it.
We got a lot of experience between us and our friends, and I think the data says. Yeah.
And here's the thing. I mean, the reality is too, I think that somebody can properly use CO2 and get all these other factors up, like you were saying, and get those minimums up to their maximums and to where it's not as pronounced as maybe somebody just bringing in CO2. I do. So I don't want to sit here and talk any shit and say,
obviously the plant is made 45% carbon. Like all those secondary metabolites are made of carbon. You need CO2, just not that 1200 ppm.
Well, and and even if you are putting it in, I don't think you need it that high levels. The thing is it's kind of a passive process. The CO2 either bounces up in the stomata or it doesn't. So if you oversaturate it, the thought process is it'll just be able to get in there easier. So anyhow.
All right. And now the thing that's in the 2020s has been one of the newest concepts, not a new concept, but one of the newer kind of not fad concepts, but the hype is behind the drybacks,
right?
Water stress, drought stress, and its effects on trichomes. I see a lot of people, like the guy that won he won the concentrate cup for DGC last year and finished second in flower, grew in 1 gallons. Flowered in 1 gallon pots. And 10 years ago, I'd been like, that's pure insanity.
That's insanity. You must be at least 10 gallons. So you're not really growing.
How does water stress / drought stress affect the trichomes?
I mean, well, at the end of the day, it's protection from desiccation is one of the things. So I think if you get those proper drybacks and give it that feeling of that it's going to have some drought stress, it's going to preemptively put out. It's just like giving plant harpin proteins to initiate systemic acquired resistance. So I look at it like that, where it's like you're getting it to the point where it's not actually drought stress, but you're getting the plant to go, it could be. So let me prepare myself, right?
Yes.
So I definitely think that there's validity to that. The other thing I like using with it is a Slicium, just because it reduces any abiotic and biotic stresses, right? Being a bioavailable, water-soluble monoorthosilicic acid, it is immediately uptakeable. It's dumped right into the cell walls and the rest is transpired. It's a very simple molecule. But that right there, I mean, I've always kept like literally mothers in solo cups because I don't really keep big mothers. I change them out real fast. And I mean, you'll have a plant that's this big in a solo cup that's this big that has no weight to it whatsoever and still just turgid perfect, right? So that's one of those things that I do. I like to call it liquid insurance because, again, it reduces any abiotic and biotic stresses. And insurance isn't needed until you go bust your face on the ground, okay? And then you might want it. You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
Yes.
You might want it once it's available.
And it's really cheap. You can get one of the little bottles of Slicium, $20. It lasts you forever. So.
Yeah, it's half a milligallon. Add it to your mix first. So there's no, but just to say that drought stress makes more frost, makes more, that's also too simple.
Right.
Like none of these things, but I think all these things in conjunction, because it was kind of like we were talking with senescing, right? Okay, well, it makes sense if you have all these different cues, and like, but if it's in the absence of these cues, these plants just kind of keep rocking along. I mean, how do you tell them?
Right. And it's a perfect analogy for that more is not better. So like drought stress is good for your plant, but like, well, now I'll triple the drought stress. Well, now you're just killing it.
Now you have a dead plant. Okay. That's
a perfect like analogy for like triple anything is not better.
But pressure, some type of pressure can and will create a response. But too much pressure can create a collapse, basically, is kind of what you're saying. So,
yes.
You want the plant to feel those pressures, because think about what it feels outside. And that's one of the reasons I even like throwing a plant outside in the fall every year out here in Colorado and just get the shit beat out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you realize just how, I took plants out on July 4th and had to live their whole life inside, whatever, put them out there, didn't give two shits about them, and just said, look, you're going to get roasted for a second, and they're amazing. You
hear so much stuff about how it just cleans up the genetics. It kind of just reinvigorates all that hybrid vigor we lose.
Totally. I love it. And then even same thing in the winter. I go, well, I wonder how cold can these get? I'm here to tell you, colder than you think. And pro tip on that, water right before a real frost or freeze is coming. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it keeps all the cells nice and fat and turgid and actually keeps their defenses up. Okay. So if you don't water right before they come in, it probably will die. But I've seen stuff go down into the upper 20s easily. Wow. As long as it's not sustained for days on end, it easily can take.
And that's 20 Fahrenheit for our 20% of non-Americans.
For the rest of that's below zero.
Below zero.
Below zero. Freezing. And one little, I also think that media matters as well, but I think it matters more from a dryback strategy, because you have to change things in that. And that's so in my mind, if somebody's going to, because I just know that, well, what about media? Okay, well, it's going to affect it, but it's going to affect your strategy.
Yes.
It's not going to say, you're using rock wool, it's going to give you more
no-till versus rock wool.
No. Yeah. And again, these are different types of steering. Living soil. Okay, here's my, rule of thumb, right? If you're growing in cocoa and you think it needs to be watered, hell yeah, just water it. No big deal. If you're growing in soil and you think it needs to be watered, wait a day. Probably too. You know what I mean? And the difference between that and you go all the way to rock wool, and it's like rock wool, you could be running
10, 12, I know 20 times.
I was going to say, I know guys that do 21 shots a day.
21 shots.
21 shots. I think they just 21. Nice. Couldn't you do 20? Couldn't you do 22? I don't know why they said 21. No, Maybe 21. They're blackjack folks. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I stand.
But yeah, obviously understanding, and we've done plenty of talk and episodes and whatnot on media. But I think the biggest point of this whole episode is just trying to say, is there some tools out there? Yes, are there bottles out there that can help steer this? Not to use, or steal that term, but, or guide the plant, right? Because again, we are plant janitors, right? We are just there to guide them along. They're the ones that are actually making their own food. We're just trying to provide everything they need to do it the most efficiently and as easily as possible, so they can do it with the least amount of energy, so they can do the most with it, right?
Plant janitors,
plant janitor, baby. So, and that's really that's always resonated with you guys a whole lot, because I take a less egocentric view of plants in the sense that they're doing the growing, we're just doing the stewarding.
It's catching on. I'm seeing it more, and I always just I always joke, I'm the smoke the like button guy. You'll see that in YouTube and everything. You're the plant janitor guy, the plant custodian.
Hey, well, you know what? custodian, dick.
Exactly.
Hey, on that note, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. This has always been fun. Josh and I are going to be getting better and better at this. We're definitely, trying a couple different things out, and we always appreciate you being along for the ride.
And Gabe will be back soon.
Gabe will be back soon. Thank you, guys. Until next time, from the Jug Den. Peace.